Welcome to Working for Women, the Independent Women's Forum podcast, where we are changing the conversation about women and public policy for the better.
Hello, I'm Carrie Lucas, Managing Director at the Independent Women's Forum, and your host for today's Working for Women podcast. I'm here with Julie Gunlock, who leads our Culture of Alarmism project. Today we're going to be celebrating the summer season a little bit by talking about how government is trying to rain on our summertime parade. It seems that everywhere you look and everything you read, you see more about how government is meddling into another issue that used to be considered private life. So Julie, first, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on.
Great. Well, first, do you think I'm overstating the problem a bit? Where, when you think of the types of things that you're going to be doing over the summer with your boys, how does government factor in, or does it?
No, it's absolutely true and kind of astonishing. I think it's astonishing to people when they hear about these things, how the government is sort of interfering in everyday life, from regulations that make products more expensive to things like shutting down lemonade stands because a child hasn't applied for a license. My kids want to go fishing with their grandparents, and I had to write the city to make sure that my kids don't need a license in addition to my dad. And I mean, these are complications that you think about how kids used to just grab a fishing pole and go out to a local stream, and I couldn't even let them do that until I had written the state official to figure out if my kids were going to be fined. So I mean, these are the kinds of things that just make life more complicated, and it really does sort of I think these are good examples of when you're arguing with someone and they think government is great and government hasn't gotten too big. I mean, these are the types of examples that clearly show government is out of control, it's gotten too big, and it's meddling in some pretty mundane parts of our life.
Yeah, Julie, that's really interesting. And you're talking about this idea of sending the kids walking down to the stream to fish or something. One of the things that I know you and I both talked about is regardless of where your kids are heading off to, in so much of America now, you're not allowed to let them walk anywhere by themselves. This whole idea that supervision must be constant, it's not even about what you can do on the public park anymore. It's basically like, can you let your kid out the front door without a policeman knocking on the door and telling you that you're a neglectful parent? Yeah,
it's really interesting that you bring that up, because I have written about this, about how, I want to be more of a free-range parent. And just a quick explanation of the free-range movement. It's a movement that was started by Lenore Skenazy. In the 90s, she let her child ride on the subway by himself. He was 8 years old. I think he was 8 or 9 years old. Most people would sort of gasp at that. I know that seemed radical to me. But her child had grown up in New York City. He'd been on the subway every single day of his life. He knew the subway. He felt confident. It's sort of equivalent to me allowing my child to walk around the block. He was very comfortable with his surroundings. Anyway, so she wrote an article about this, and that, people were outraged, and they called her the worst mother in America. And so she said, this is crazy. I mean, my son felt confident. He knew the subway. He knew how it worked. It wasn't that big of a deal. So she created this, what's now known as the free range kids movement, and that is the idea that you need to allow your children a little bit of freedom, more freedom, certainly more freedom than people give their kids today. And the reason for that is that it really helps develop a child's thinking skills. It helps them develop good judgment and the ability to do a little risk assessment and all of it, survival skills.
Problem solve, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, problem solving.
Problem solve, yeah, and just have a little bit of adventure. I feel like it's such a shame when you think about how much kids are told, okay, here's the space in which you can play and have your pretends, but don't go over there. Don't walk any place that isn't already been padded with a bunch of pillows so you can't cut yourself. It really is. I feel like everybody, Gen Xers like us that know that wasn't, that's not how we lived. We were going around the neighborhood and riding our bikes, and sometimes we got into scrapes or something bad happened. It's a big part of the learning process.
Yeah, and what stops me, what really, it's interesting. I'm not afraid when my child takes his bike and goes around the block. I'm not worried about predators or pedophiles or drunk drivers. I'm worried that a police officer will knock on my door and get me in trouble because I'm not hovering over my child. And so that's what stops me. And that is so sad. And that is a sign that, many police and government officials have gotten out of control. The idea that I'm more worried about getting in trouble for letting my child ride his bike around town, and that's what stops me. It stops me from being the parent I want to be because I am literally afraid that someone will get me in trouble.
Yeah, that's such a shame. And I know, Julie, you've also talked, we're talking kind of about that kind of freedom to make your own choices. But I know that a lot of the government regulations also come down to the way government meddles in some of our kind of private lives is also by putting on regulations that make things more expensive. I recently read that you've got the state of New York running Airbnb out of business. You have Austin is getting rid of Uber and ride-sharing things, all of which make it harder for people to do fun things. I know you write a lot when it comes to food. How is government making food more expensive?
There's just the list is endless. It's unbelievable. I mean, from banning certain kinds of oils to now they're going to be restricting salt. There's murmurs that they're going to be restricting sugar. I mean, these kinds of things. Okay, so in Obamacare, there was a provision that requires restaurants to post calorie information on their menus. I mean, all this stuff costs money. So let's just look at the calorie information. I mean, you think of a store manager or a restaurant manager wants to change something on the menu, maybe to be more seasonal, right? Tomatoes are in season now, or in the later summer, so they want to change. They want to put something with more tomatoes on their menu. Okay, they then need to send that dish out to a lab, and it will be analyzed. The calorie and fat and all that stuff will be determined, and then they're able to put on the menu. And that costs money. Okay, that costs a lot of money. And then there's the need to always prepare the dish the same way. Now they allow a little bit of wiggle room. So, if one chef puts a teaspoon more of goat cheese or something on the dish, that'll change. There's a little bit of wiggle room, but not much. And so there's this. You also need to be completely precise every time you make that meal. I mean, those costs are just passed on. So the salad that might have been. Yeah. They might have charged $8. Well, because of the added cost, they're going to charge $10 for it because they can't absorb that extra cost. They've got to pass that on to the consumer. This is and frankly, it's nice to have calorie information, but studies show that people just sort of ignore them. And in some cases, they might order something a little bit higher calorie because the salad is 300, but the sandwich is 500. I'll just eat those extra. And then they're missing all the nutrients from the salad. So, look, it's frustrating for me to when you consider these regulations, this will be good for you, when in fact it really does nothing except increase costs. That's the galling part.
Yeah, that's it's interesting. I think if people knew just how much this ends up padding their the costs, the bills, their grocery bills, they would be outraged. There's something else.
Yeah, and it's not. And Europe. Oh, go on.
Sure,
sorry.
Go on. No, I was just going to say, I've been living in Europe for 7 of the last 8 years, and another thing I think that Americans should be outraged about and that people aren't totally aware of is just how much the cost of litigation affects life in America and really limit our choices. Obviously you've got, when you're talking about these trying to comply with all these regulations. Well, in addition, all these restaurateurs and all these, anybody who is interfacing with the public has to worry about getting sued. And it's such a different thing here in Europe where there's not nearly the litigation culture that there is in America. And one thing that, it's not only that things are more affordable, you also have just so much more of a variety. You have places, you'll go to some restaurants here that are basically in somebody's home, and I'll be surprised that you have, these stairs are a little rickety, and you're thinking, my goodness, in America, this thing would be slapped as a public safety hazard.
Oh,
but you know what? You learn to be a little more careful, and we have this tremendous variety here, and you monitor your kids a little bit. You might get scraped, but nobody says, "Oh my goodness, I stubbed my toe." I'm going to sue somebody. It's really such a healthy change here.
I remember you telling me that one of your children had broken his arm at a playground, and there was an adult supervising the kids playing, and when you went to pick them up, she just kind of said, "Oh, by the way, I think he hurt his arm." Whereas, and that was just sort of like, "Oh, okay," and then you took care of it. Whereas in America, I'm sure you would have had to sign 50 waivers before dropping your kids off at this playground.
And you're absolutely,
and then there would have been, there would have been such, concern that you were going to sue. Where I remember you saying they didn't show much concern because there isn't that culture there.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It wasn't a broken arm. It was just a little scrape on the chin, but it was the kind of thing where you're absolutely right, where it was amazing to me that we had so much freedom and so many services offered because there was an expectation that you're normal, I'm normal. My kid fell off a step and scraped his knee and his chin. That happens. It happens when I'm watching him. It's going to happen when essentially anybody's watching him, and we're all going to say "Oh, okay, sure. Oh, you put a Band-Aid on. Thanks. See you later. It's all okay." Where I feel like in America, I would have never been allowed to do that in the first place. You've got to sign a waiver when you enter a preschool to say that they're allowed to put Band-Aids on your kids. Just all sorts of stuff that's just utter nonsense, and it costs extra money, but worth it. Just makes life so much less fun. It's really a shame.
Yeah, it really is. And you think about there are actually bad consequences, really dangerous consequences. You think of what Austin's doing about how they're banning Lyft and Uber and other ride-sharing services. And when they did that, the DUIs, the drunk driving cases, went through the roof because. Look, last night I went out. I had a reception to go to in D.C. I Ubered there and home. It was because now I only had a couple drinks, but I certainly wasn't going to take that risk, and it was very nice for me to be able to do that. And then if you don't have that service, of course, you still have taxis, but if you're in a remote area, if you're in an area that doesn't have taxis going back and forth, it's really nice. And so, again, in Austin, where they took these services away, you have the DUIs that went up. I mean, the city government there has literally endangered the people of Austin by robbing them of these services. It's absolutely terrible.
Yeah, you're right. And that's just such a loss of entrepreneurship, but then a loss of fun. You're right. Taxis often cost twice as much as Uber. There's a lot of 20-somethings who are going to say, you know what, I only have $15 left in my pocket. I guess I'll just have to do my best to get home rather than take a cab. And that's a true danger. And it's just a real unnecessary shame that our government's imposing on all of us. But Julie, this is obviously a topic we could go on and on about, but I know we both have busy schedules and you want to go out and enjoy a bit of the summer day with your kids just like I do with mine. So we're going to wrap it up, and I want to thank you for joining me today, Julie. And this has been another edition of IWF's Working for Women podcast. And for those who listened, thank you for your time. You can find out more about this topic and many more at IWF.org.
If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, please give it a thumbs up, share it on social media, or stop by IWF.org for similar content.